When you picture German beekeeping, you probably think of something really charming, right? Like rolling hills, quaint little beehives. It's an idyllic scene. But the reality? Well, it's a lot more complicated. We're going to dive into why this beloved tradition is actually caught in a deep structural crisis, what you might call a honey trap.
Okay, so first, just look at these numbers. On the surface, Germany looks like an absolute powerhouse of beekeeping. We're talking about 170,000 beekeepers and well over 1 million hives. You'd think, wow, that's a thriving industry. But here's the thing. These numbers are hiding a really big secret.
So that's the big question, isn't it? With so many people and so many bees, how on earth could there be a crisis? Well, that's what we're here to unpack. It turns out the very thing that makes German beekeeping so popular is also its Achilles heel.
To really get this paradox, we have to look closer at who all these beekeepers actually are. And believe it or not, the fact that there are so many of them is a huge part of the problem.
This chart just lays it all out there. It's a wild contrast. Germany has 60 times more beekeepers than New Zealand, but only about double the hives. And here's the kicker. In New Zealand, almost all the hives, 94%, are commercial. In Germany, it's less than 10%. This isn't really an industry. It's a massive, nationwide hobby.
And it all boils down to this number, 6.8. That's the average number of hives per beekeeper in Germany. Think about that. You just can't build a professional, profitable business with fewer than 7 hives. There are no economies of scale, no real reason to invest in better tech. It basically blocks any path to going pro.
And this chart just drives the point home perfectly. Over 90% of German beekeepers are hobbyists. Now, their passion is amazing, but their motivation isn't profit. That means the whole sector isn't driven by things like economic efficiency or the need to innovate to stay afloat. And that has some huge knock-on effects.
So let's move on to our next point. This whole hobbyist system is kind of locked in place by a very powerful gatekeeper, the German Beekeepers Association, or the DIB. It's an organization that really champions tradition. Sometimes, though, that comes at the cost of progress. Just take their famous honey jar. To Germans, it's a symbol of trust, quality. You see it, you know you're getting the good stuff. But it's also a massive roadblock. It only comes in one 500-gram size. That kills any chance for modern branding, different packaging options, or large-scale processing. If you're a beekeeper who wants to scale up or sell abroad, this jar is actually your enemy. And this whole situation has a name. It's called a cultural regulatory trap. It's what happens when rules that were made with the best intentions, to protect the quality and tradition of German honey, end up accidentally trapping the entire industry in the past. They're literally preventing the modernization that the sector desperately needs to survive.
Now, you'd think that a country like Germany, famous for its science and engineering, would have incredibly high-tech beekeeping practices, right? Well, that brings us to the next piece of this crisis, a huge disconnect between the experts and the people actually working the hives.
So get this, Germany is home to the LAVES Celle. It's a world-class, top-tier center for bee research. The expertise is there, it's totally elite, but here's the paradox. Almost none of that cutting-edge knowledge is actually making its way to those 170,000 hobbyists out in the field. This quote from Guido Eich, a top advisor at the Institute, just says it all. The problem isn't a lack of information. It's that old, and often wrong, methods are being taught in local beekeeping clubs. They're creating learned mistakes that are passed down from one generation to the next and are incredibly difficult to correct. And what kind of mistakes are we talking about? We're talking about really critical stuff, like not being able to spot common diseases, not using simple tools like a magnifying glass to figure out why a hive died, and this is a big one, using totally outdated ways to fight the Varroa mite, which is the #1 killer of honeybees worldwide. These aren't just small slip-ups. They lead to massive and preventable colony deaths every single year. So we've got a system that's inefficient, a knowledge gap, but the story gets even stranger. There's another conflict brewing, one that most people would never expect. It actually challenges that whole save the bees idea by putting honeybees in direct competition with their wild cousins. Okay, this is so important to understand. A honeybee is not a wild animal. It's basically domesticated livestock, like a tiny cow. They live in these huge cities of up to 50,000. They'll eat almost any kind of pollen, and they can fly for miles. Wild bees are the total opposite. Most are loners, they often need very specific plants to survive, and they don't travel far at all. So in a landscape where flowers are already scarce, these two are fighting for the exact same food.
And this puts conservationists in a really tough spot. When there isn't enough food to go around, how do you manage the conflict between this super efficient farm animal and a bunch of vulnerable wild species? The answer, turns out, is regulation.
And that regulation comes down to one stark number: 3. Germany's main conservation group, NABU, is now demanding a cap of just 3 honeybee hives per square kilometer in protected nature areas. Now, for professional beekeepers who need those areas to survive, that is a devastating economic blow.
Okay, so the situation is a tangled mess, right? A hobbyist structure trapped by tradition, a broken knowledge pipeline, and now an ecological war. It sounds pretty grim, but experts have actually laid out a very clear path forward. Here it is, the 4-step blueprint. First, modernize the rules to let beekeepers actually market their honey properly. Second, stop giving away pollination for free. Turn it into a paid professional service, just like they do in the US. Third, and this is crucial, fix the training system with mandatory science-based courses on how to manage diseases. And finally, beekeepers and conservationists need to stop fighting each other and team up to demand better farm policies that put more flowers back into the landscape for all bees. And that leaves us with the final big question. German beekeeping is really at a crossroads. It's a clash between a cherished cultural tradition and the cold, hard facts of economics and ecology. The roadmap to a professional, sustainable future is there. But whether that path can be taken before it's too late, well, that's what we'll have to wait and see.